Hi friends, today we are going to discuss on Docker Swarm. What is Docker Swarm? What is the need of Docker Swarm? What is the advantage of Docker Swarm? We will see everything practically. So in this video I will explain everything theoretically that what actually Docker Swarm is. In the upcoming videos we will see it as practical as well. So see what Docker Swarm is and what is the use of this. So to explain this, let me show you one thing practically. Till now we have discussed Docker images. After that we have discussed Docker file. After that we discussed Docker container. After that we discussed Docker compose. See, if you will notice in these four topics, what was there? In the Docker images, we were able to create or pull one container at a time from the Docker hub. From the Docker hub, we were able to pull one container in our Docker images. Then after that, we wanted to move in some advanced level. Then what we did, we created one Docker file. And with that Docker file, we can create multiple images at a time. So, multiple Docker images at a time. So, first with the Docker images, we were able to pull one Docker image at a time. After that we moved some advanced feature, then we got Docker file where we were able to create or pull more than one Docker images at a time. Then after that we have seen Docker container. So in the Docker container we were able to run one container at a time. So but we were searching for more advanced feature for this Docker container. Then we moved to Docker compose. With the Docker compose, we were able to run more than one container at a time with the Docker compose. So these four things already we have covered. So now see, if you will notice in the Docker compose, we were able to run more than one container at a time. Okay. So suppose if I will show the example of the container, then this is container 1. This is my container 2 and this is my container 3. Sorry. All three containers are hosted on top of the Docker engine. So what is happening? This all three Docker container is not able to communicate with each other. So we can make it as a communicate by creating our separate network, which we will cover in our network topic. Docker networking topic. But if you will see simply, so if these three container will not be able to communicate with each other. So what this was the first drawback which we were having. The first drawback was that none of the container were able to communicate with each other. And if we will move to second level, then second level, consider this as a host 1. This is a host 2. This is a host 3 and this is a host 4. I have 4 host machine, okay. And inside this host machine, I have created multiple containers. So, none of the containers will be able to communicate with each other. So, suppose this is my container 1 and this is container 2. So, this might be a container of Nginx, this might be a Tomcat, this might be DB2, whatever the container it is. So none of the container will be able to communicate with each other. So what is Docker Swarm and why Docker Swarm is needed? See, till now what we have seen that with the Docker compose, what we can do, we can create multiple containers in a server. But what was the drawback? The drawback was that with the compose we achieved that we can create multiple containers at a time. But all the containers was creating in a single host machine. In a single host machine, in a single host system, all the containers was creating. But if you will move to the production environment, no companies follows to deploy all of their application in a single host. Because what happens, suppose if that host goes down, entire application will be gone down. So what happens? All the companies, everyone prefers to deploy their application in multiple servers. So suppose an application is having database server, front-end server, web server, multiple servers they are having. So what we can do with the Docker Swarm, Let's suppose this is my host. Let me write over here. Host 1. This is my host 2, and this is my host 3, and this is my host 4. So see what is happening. What Docker Swarm does. Docker Swarm will make a cluster of these 4 hosts. So inside this host 4, we will find container 1, container 2. This also we can say is container 1. This also we can say is container 2. So whatever container you want to say, you can say it. So that doesn't matter. So see what is happening. I have 2 containers inside the host 1, 2 containers inside the host 2. So what Docker Swarm facilitates us that this container 1 of host 1 machine will be able to communicate with the any of the containers which is inside this Docker Swarm cluster. This big circle, this big rectangle which we are looking at, we can say it is Docker Swarm cluster. All this we will understand in a practical session. As a theoretical, I am just saying, means see what Docker Swarm facilitates us. See, suppose in this container 1, I will deploy my database application. This in container 2, I will deploy my database application. And in this host 2, I will deploy my web server. So what will happen? This host 1 container will be able to communicate with any of the host 2 or host 3 or host 4. So this is what Docker Swarm facilitates us. So see what is the advantage we are getting in this. Suppose if any of our host machine goes down, so what is happening that not our entire container is going down, only few containers went down. And what Docker Swarm advantage is that if suppose my host 1 machine will go down, then whatever applications, whatever containers was running inside this host 1, immediately it will come up in any of the host machine. Means what I mean to say that suppose C1 and C2 is running in host 1. So suppose due to some error my host 1 server went down. So what will happen? This C1 and C2 container will immediately come up in any of the host machine, either in host 2, in host 3 or in host 4. So it depends on the load balancer which we will discuss in brief in networking parts of the Docker. So as of now, just understand this, like this Docker Swarm facilitates us for all the containers to communicate with each other, which is a part of the Docker cluster, Docker Swarm cluster. So see, that is what we discussed here in the theoretical part also. What I have mentioned over here, till now we have created one container on our Docker host machine and created multiple Docker using Docker Compose file, but it was also on the single host machine. But now what we want to achieve? We want to achieve that, see, this is my Docker engine, this is Docker engine, this is Docker engine, but all these 3 are independent of each other. No one is able to communicate with each other. So what I want to achieve now, that all these 3 containers, all these 3 Docker engine should communicate with each other. So whatever the container will be configured inside this, so all 3 will be able to communicate with each other. This is our point, what we want to achieve. So see Docker Swarm, what it does. This 3 Docker engine or Docker server, what you say, this 3 Docker engine is there. So what will happen? Docker Swarm will make a cluster of this, and in the Docker Swarm 2 things is important. One is the manager server and second one is the worker server. Okay. So what manager server does? Manager server will gives the instruction, or in whatever the commands we want to run, we will run in the manager server. And what happens in the worker server? In the worker server, that commands will be implemented. So suppose, hey, this is my Docker Swarm cluster. Okay. So suppose this is my Docker master server or Docker manager server, and these 3 are my Docker worker server. Okay. Now suppose I want to run 5 Tomcat containers. So I will run that Tomcat container in this master server, and what will happen that on all these 3 containers will be distributed the container, and the 5 containers will come up in distributing this all these 3 Docker engine. So how it happens, we will see it practically in brief. So see, if we will see what is the advantage of Docker Swarm, then let me take the example of Amazon.com. See, whenever we are reaching out to Amazon.com, okay, so we know how to reach any application. Suppose my Nginx application is installed on any IP address, then by default the port number is 8080. So to reach to that Nginx application, Nginx server, I have to mention the IP address colon port number. So suppose if we are reaching out to Amazon.com and that application of the Amazon.com suppose might have kept on any of the application with the port number 8080. So if load balancer or this swarm concept would not be there, then what would have happened? This IP address would have redirected us to the server where that application has been hosted. So suppose what would happen that a huge traffic would come. Suppose Amazon will come with some offers and more people will get attracted toward the Amazon website. Then at that time more traffic will come as per the expectation. So at that time what will happen? All this load is getting redirected to the only one server on top of which the Amazon application is deployed. So what will happen at that time? The entire application will go down due to high load or high traffic. So what load balancing or Docker Swarm helps us, that with this Docker Swarm feature we can make a cluster of multiple servers. Suppose this is I have distributed this Amazon application into these 3 servers. Okay, so this one is redirected to the port 8080, this is also port 8080, this is also port 8080. So what will happen? Suppose 20 users came to my Amazon.com. So what it will do, what Swarm will do, Swarm will redirect to the 20 user to those server where the load is low, where the low load is there. Suppose this is my first server and this is already consuming more memory and is very busy. So this load balancer will redirect all these 20 users to either this server or this server, or they will distribute it. Means the load balancer distribute the user in such a manner that no one server should get all the loads, so that all the things will be maintained properly. So this was the Docker Swarm. We will see all this practically, that how this load balancing happens and all. So for the theoretical parts, just understand that Docker Swarm is a clustering tool, and it makes a cluster of multiple servers so that all the servers can communicate with each other. So now I have mentioned some features of the Docker Swarm, like Docker Swarm is a clustering and scheduling tool for Docker containers. Already I have said that Docker Swarm is a clustering tool. Clustering means what we can say, that we can make a cluster of the multiple host server, and all the host server or all the containers inside the host server will be able to communicate with each other. Okay, so this is what the clustering is. So with Swarm, IT administrator and developer can establish and manage the cluster of Docker nodes in a single virtual machine. So what it means to say that with the Docker Swarm we can achieve a feature like that. We will suppose here will be my Docker Swarm master. This is my Swarm master server. Let me write. This is my Swarm master, Swarm manager, whatever you can say. So with this Swarm manager, if I will run any command, it will be implemented on all the 4 servers, or on those servers on top of which load is low. So what Swarm does, Swarm considers all these multiple servers as a single Docker engine. So Docker Swarm mode enables to have multiple Docker engine or node as a single cluster. See, this multiple host, if you will look inside this is host 1, this is host 2, this is host 3, this is host 4. But Swarm will make a cluster of all these 4 host machines, and all this will be considered as a single Docker engine. Okay. So how it happens, we will look it inside with the more practical session. So with this swarm, what happens, it is mandatory that we have to make at least one manager server who will control all the other host machine. So we can make more than one manager as well, but at least one manager should be there. Only manager manages all the commands which we run in the Docker swarm. So what the manager task is, manager will always manage all the task which is going on either on the worker or on the manager. But see, Docker, in the Docker swarm, what happens, whenever I will run any command, so that command will be, suppose I am running 20 Tomcat containers and I am running in this swarm manager server, I run 20 Tomcat server, okay. So what will happen, this 20 Tomcat server will be distributed among these 4 host machine as well as this swarm machine as well. Means Docker swarm will distribute that 20 Tomcat server among these 5 server. So this is not the best practice. By default, Docker swarm distributes the containers in manager server as well, but we have to make manager to manage only the management related task. So all this we will see in practical session, that how can we make the manager to manage only practical task. So yeah, Docker swarm. See, in the Docker Compose, what we have seen, that Docker Compose was the third party tool. We used to have install it separately along with the Docker engine. But Docker swarm, we don't have to do anything. It already comes with the Docker engine. Suppose if you want to see it practically, then Docker -v means my Docker is installed in this machine. So what I will do, I will show you Docker swarm is already I have shown this Docker info command. With the Docker info, you will get all the things that whatever the features is there in my Docker server. So if you will find swarm anywhere, you will get it. Let's see. Here I am getting swarm as inactive. Okay. So already swarm feature is there in your Docker engine whenever you will install the Docker engine, but the swarm feature will be disabled by default. So what we have to do whenever we want to use this swarm, so we have to initiate or activate this swarm feature. After that we will be able to use this swarm. Okay. So we will see it practically in our next session. So just as of now, just understand that Docker swarm, we don't have to install it separately. Already it comes with the Docker engine and we only need to initiate or activate that Docker swarm. So there are many advantages of Docker swarm as well. So what are the advantages? I have mentioned point-wise points, so you can go through it. Few of the important points which I highlighted, I am just making you explain. So see, Docker cluster management integrated with the Docker engine. So already I have said that with the Docker engine, with the Docker swarm, we can make a cluster of the Docker engine. We can make a cluster like I had shown over here. This big circle, you can assume it as a cluster. So inside this cluster, I have hosted 4 servers. Okay. So this help us to make a cluster of the Docker engine. So after that decentralized design. So what is the decentralized design? See, instead of handling differentiation between the nodes at deployment time, the Docker engine handles any specialization at runtime. So what we can do, we can deploy both. Means already I said that whatever we will run in this swarm manager, that will be deployed in swarm manager as well as in the host machine. So this we will avoid from the upcoming time. But this is decentralized design, means it is not that only it will be Docker swarm will redirect to run some container in any of the particular host. It is not like that. It will follow the load balancer mechanism and it will run the container in all the machines. Okay. So after that you can see declarative service model is there. Scaling is the main and most advantage feature of the Docker swarm. What scaling is, which I said earlier, that suppose this is my first four host machine is there. Suppose my first host machine goes down, and inside these few of the applications or containers was running. So what will happen? Automatically Docker Swarm will bring up these two containers which was running in this host server to any of the three host machines. And there is also a mechanism how the container comes up and on top of which host machine it will come up. So there is totally it follows a mechanism. I will share all the concepts with you in the next video. So in this video I am just only giving the theoretical parts. Okay, so you can go through all the theoretical parts, like it is a desired state reconciliation. So suppose if we have set up 10 replicas of a container and a worker machine hosting 2 of these replica cases, automatically manageable, which I already said. Or suppose I am running these containers and suppose these 2 containers goes down, automatically Docker Swarm will bring up these 2 containers in any of the other host machine. So this is all which I have mentioned over here. Multi-host networking is the most important part. And what is the multi-host networking? And multi-host networking follows the overlay feature. See, if you will go to this, if I will come to this server and if I will run docker network ls, then by default you will see that only 4 network is there by default. Okay, this 4 network always comes by default. So the first driver is bridge 1, the second driver is host, and the third driver is null. So what this driver is and what the task they does, all the things I will discuss in the Docker networking parts in details. So if I will activate the Docker Swarm, suppose let me activate the Docker Swarm. So no, I will not activate now. Okay, let me activate Docker Swarm init. So what I am doing, I have activated the Docker Swarm. So this Docker Swarm init is the command to initiate the start the Docker Swarm, and in whichever server I will run the Docker Swarm init, that server will become my master server. So as I have run this command in my Docker Swarm init in this server, so it became my master server. So suppose if I will run docker network ls, so see what I will see. I had seen that one special network came up which is ingress and overlay, and this came with for the swarm feature. So we can see that this swarm was not there previously. So after I activated this swarm network came up. So whatever all the containers were able to communicate with each other, it was only due to this swarm overlay network. So we will discuss all this in details in the networking parts of the Docker. So as of now we have already covered all the theoretical parts of the Docker. So I think you are now at least able to clear about that what the Docker Swarm is. So Docker Swarm is mainly used for the clustering purpose, and using Docker Swarm, multiple containers inside the different hosts as well can communicate with each other. So 2 things mainly we achieve with the Docker Swarm. The first thing is that with the Docker Swarm, I can run multiple containers. Suppose I want to run 20 containers. So with the Docker Compose, what we did, that if we will run the Docker Compose file, all these 20 containers will run in a single host machine on top of which I am running the Docker Compose command. But with the Docker Swarm, what will happen? If I will run 20 containers over there, then it will distribute the 20 containers among all the 4 servers, or whatever, how many servers will be there inside the cluster. So this is the first feature of the Docker Swarm. The second feature is that whatever the containers will be there inside the Docker Swarm, all will be able to communicate with each other. Suppose these 2 containers are hosted on host 1 and these 2 containers is running on host 2. So all these containers will be able to communicate with each other. Suppose if I will go inside this container and if I will print the container IP of this one, then I will be able to print. So we will see it in a more beautiful way in a practical session. So I think for the theoretical it is over. So next session we will see with the practical that what Docker Swarm is and what we can achieve with the Docker Swarm in details. So I think it is over for this now. Get ready for practical of the Docker Swarm. Bye bye.